So this will be a huge contrast right now. So we're gonna speak about well-being after the talk of everybody killing everybody. So this is gonna be about transforming well-being theory. The primary end goal, I think, for many, starting from the individuals and communities and societies and businesses, is well-being. And then how can we make the progress towards well-being gradual direction, and that means transformation. So let's start with basics. So we see here a line. It goes up and down. And let's say that's a person who would like to manage the weight. And then what can happen in many cases, so there's a diet and the weight goes down, there's another diet and the weight goes down and then comes back. And then oftentimes in the end there's a big question mark, sometimes frustration, disappointment, and all those kind of things. And this is to exemplify change. Change as we know it. Change is a fluctuation, up and down. And then the example from the animal world where the transformation happened. And what the difference is, the transformation is a directional and there's no way back. And this is an example from the animal world about the transformation. Why transformation is so important is because those who have studied mathematics, they know this formula very well. So here you have 101% of yourself, or 101% of your community or the business. Over the 365 days, which is a year, you get the result, which is much larger. If you are 1% less of yourself, you're 99% of yourself or your community or your business, over a year, that's the result. That's why gradual improved changes, which are transformation, are so essential. And now will be a first time, this will be the highlight of the recent study that is not published yet, but it's okay to take pictures and everything. You know this presumption that many times people at the health departments and municipalities think, if the people would know, if they would have the knowledge, it will bring them to the action, to the behavior, or to the use, right? So let's make the communication about eating healthier, make more sustainable choices. And there is some effect in this arrow, and I use structural equation modeling to study that. And then, of course, there is another step before actual behavior and use, which is intention to behave or intention to use something. And by the way, these arrows are represented by the strength of on that effect. But there is a fourth element, which is acceptance. So this is the model, structural equation model, having four constructs, which is knowledge, which leads to acceptance. And there will be more arrows coming up here. But this is a knowledge about something, and we studied persuasive systems so that people have knowledge about them, whether they accept them, whether they intend to use one of the persuasive systems, and whether they actually use. So what our study showed is that the strongest correlation and the effect is from knowledge not to the actual behavior, not to the intention, but to the acceptance first. After the acceptance, the strongest connection is to the intention of using that, and then after that, from the intention to use. So just to, I think that hypothesis was in the air for many, many years, that knowledge doesn't lead strongly to the actual behavior, but it goes through this way. And then we looked at the moderators. So we took the typical one, age, and if that moderator is in the yellow, that means the older the person, the stronger the relationship. So that's the moderator over there. So the older the person, the more knowledge leads to the acceptance, and intention leads to the use. And then if we have the moderator which is in the reverse or inverse, that means it's opposite. And in this case, it's more stronger for female. So for female, knowledge is stronger determinant of the acceptance, and intention is predicting the actual use more for male participants. And then we looked at the other, so whether people look for the information online, and if they really look for the information online, then this was a stronger correlation between knowledge predicting acceptance, and the inverse was for those who don't really spend their time online, the stronger correlation was between the acceptance and use. And then we looked at the many other moderators, there are plenty of them, like happiness, fulfillment, mindfulness, distrustfulness, and fearfulness. So we'll not lead into the details. When the paper is out, we will get into more of the data about itself. So now coming back to, if we think about what can make the transformation successful, this is one of the ways how people have been encouraged, you know, the carrots. And there is another one, which is the stick. These two methods work. For how long? For as long as they are present. So that's one limitation. And the second limitation is somebody has to maintain them. Somebody has to give the carrots and somebody has to hold the stick. So those are the challenges. If we want to achieve a long-term sustainable transformation, these are very limited. And let's look at the example. Of course, people are quite creative, and this was done in Moscow, a metro station. For 30 squats, people are given a free ticket to the metro. It worked quite well. People did that. They replicated that in Mexico City. Also tried to do a similar thing, engaging people to be more active. And in Dubai, they offered 1 gram of gold for every kilogram that people lost weight. Again, carrots and sticks, so they worked as long as they were provided. So if people don't get gold anymore, do they have an incentive? If there is no machine like this, do they do something? So that's the example of a short-term change, which is not a transformation. So therefore, here is the typology of change. There are 3 types. Transactional. So I exchange my 30 squats for the ticket. There can be period of time, and that could be you sign up for a gym for 3 months, but it doesn't guarantee real transformation. Therefore, the third type of change, which is transformational. And here's the secret. I will tell you the secret. What's the difference between first 2, which is a one-time or durational, and what's the secret of transformation? Acceptance as well. Change of the identity, change of the internal norms. But if you look at this or the way they are described, so this is like a dot, this is like a period, and this is like an arrow. So it has no end. So it's directional. So the magic, the difference between this durational and directional, there is no endpoint. And that's why so many behavioral studies don't have a sustainable effect, because they always have limited in time. So, and what's the power? What's the power to enable transformations comparing to carrots and sticks? Social influence, social norms being one of the 7 principles that we have in the physical world. And this is if you see the situation on the street, people staring upwards, you instantly react to that. And that, by the way, those who have read the book Thinking Fast and Slow, this triggers system 1, bypassing system 2. Most of the persuasion, carrots and sticks, are designed for system 2. So why don't we use this more often? And this is the paper, or this is pretty much description of tutorial. It was done this month, earlier, in the Persuasive Technology Conference, which describes all of the typology, and it's available online. The same paper also introduces the tool set, 8 applicable tools, all scientifically driven, how to design for the transformation. Starts with a triangle, ends with ethics, 8 numbers, the orange ones. 4 out of 8 is to detect the root cause of the problem, which usually is in the attitude, which is a hidden part. And then 2 tools are to design for transformation, and the last 2 is to make sure that your transformation or your innovation, this technology design, is not backfiring and it's ethically driven. So let me introduce the transforming framework. Let's start with the triangle. And that comes from social cognitive theory, quite famous, from Albert Bandura, Stanford. Environment constantly is interconnected with what people think and what they do. And whenever we change something, it changes the rest. For this, I have prepared an example, which is a real business case. Here we have a package, and there's a product in the package. So what do you think, what is in the package? System 1 says TV. System 2 says bike. System 2 is correct. Next question is asked by the system 2 of the brains. Why there is this TV image on the box, right? What do you think? That's a question. Why on the package where the bike is inside?
Someone wants it to be stolen.
Well, a TV always has an image. They just picked an image that's attractive.
First of all, most of us will look at this as the end consumer. So we imagine ourselves receiving this package and how we would react to that. But this wasn't the target audience for this image. There's a different audience for that. Yes, correct. Shipping people. Why the shipping people have to look at the... Extremely smart. This is how it works. This is how the triangle works. They made one simple change into the environment. So now on the package, instead of being nothing, there is a TV image. So the handlers take the box and, oh, it's a bike. Bike, oh, TV, okay. Let's handle with care. Bypasses system 2, reacts to the system 1. This is how the triangle works. The company produced very great electric bikes, still produced. They suffered 30% loss on the damage of on delivery. After this image, from 30% down to 5%.
But I thought it was a TV, not a bike.
That's what your system 1 says. Looks like TV, but it's a bike. And there was a really good reason why one person one day said, we cannot stand this damage on delivery. Let's do something about it. And then one creative person said, let's put the TV image. Yes.
What if someone figures this out and then all TVs will be broken as a result? Because everyone will
It's a bike, not a TV.
I think it's possible, but it... Yeah. Right, so let's move on. That was tool number 1, triangle. The next is curve. So curve pretty much takes the same 3 components and put it on the 2 axes. It also comes from the elaboration likelihood model of persuasion, which says if the environment is bad and attitude is low, behavior is not happening. So either you need to make the environment better or improve the attitude, and you enable the behavior. So that's tool number 1, and to give you an example of that, there is an illustration. You might have seen that. So this is a sidewalk over there. This is where people usually shortcut. And there is this sign, please use sidewalk. And we all kind of know why it doesn't work. But if we go deeper into the details, this pathway is perceived as there have been thousands of people walking on there. This tells us the norm. It's just not written there. And therefore, this sign, which most likely is perceived as one person has created it, that's the end of the game. That's how powerful it is. Of course, there can be ways how to overcome that. For example, just cover this 10,000 by the new grass, and you delete that, so the game is 1-0. So that's a way how we can really be mindful about the effect of the environment and the attitude. The next is metric. Metric is important that we know how to measure the transformation, which means if we have today the people, they misbehave, we want them to behave normally. And then we have a metric how we measure and what we are counting and what's the measurement today and in the future. And this is what we did at the MIT Media Lab, counting how many people entered the building and whether they choose stairs or elevator. And then we use that data and project it next to the elevators to see and to affect their choices. After that, the last tool for the detection of the root cause is circles. What is also very important always to remember that not everyone will do what we expect them to do, not everyone will follow the norm, but essentially there will be always people who accepted the norm and do it. And there will be people always who are against that norm, whether that's new or old. And then there we have these people of January 1st. What people do on January 1st? Resolutions. They're kind of willing to change, but they're not like succeeding with that. So, and what the whole transforming framework is about, we need to open up this gate. So provide the social influence coming in. Other people actually complying with the norm or following the norm, and when you open it up, this is the effect what we get. And therefore, so many campaigns, health campaigns, and other similar activities that target here fail because of this simple reason. These people are not willing, these are willing, and that's the huge difference. So here we'll show an example from an airport where they introduced interesting innovation, and then they filmed, recorded it. It's done by the Dutch national airline. That's a table, dinner table, which is quite high. What they did, they installed the pressure sensors in the stools, and if people sit down, the table gradually comes down. So people figured it out. It was made over the Christmas time. And the message was, we will bring you the Christmas feeling, although you are waiting for your plane. And it required everyone to sit around. So certainly, people are cooperative beings. They made it table down, they're all happy. But now reflect on the three groups. Certainly, people sitting around the table are the green people, so they actually got into doing it. Can you see the yellow people in this picture? So those guys are hesitant. Like, there's one guy, there's another one, there's another one. They might be standing there for the whole show. But next time, next airport. And then the red people are just not paying completely attention to this. So this is how you investigate where the problem is before you get into the designing and preparing the transformation. For getting the solution be designed, there is a fifth tool, which is called layers. So first of all, as you remember, data. Data is about somebody sitting on a stool or not. Intelligence is making sure that they calculate and make the right choice. And transforming is how you reflect back to, in this case, in the airport, to the people. And we did another, and this is, to be very honest, I'll tell the secret later. Okay, this is the real picture. This is Boston downtown. That's a Longfellow Bridge connecting MIT campus and the Boston downtown. And this is a screen which tells in the last hour, bikes go 12 miles per hour and cars go 9. Cars stand there, you don't see any bikes, but technology tells they were here and they were going faster. That's a reminder for the yellow people that actually you have a bike, you ride on the weekends, and you might actually go to the work. The trick here is it's a mock-up. So we just designed this over the real picture. But you felt how it worked. So we have sensors, we have TVs, we have simple algorithms to implement. It's a question, again, coming back to norms, why it's not happening yet. So most likely the people responsible for the city management and health are not accepting it as being normal to put on the screens, but actually it's all already prepared and ready. For that, there is another paper, which is Persuasive Cities for Sustainable Wellbeing, Quantified Communities by myself and Kent Larson, who is the City Science Research Group principal scientist at the MIT Media Lab, still there. It's 2016. Moving on, what's the tool number 6? If we want this solution to be very effective, we rely on social influence. We will look into 7 principles. They are summarized in my PhD, which is 5 years ago, Social Influencing Systems. And here are all the 7. Social norms is one of them. Social facilitation, cooperation, learning, comparison, norms, competition, recognition. Interesting, this is the meta model based on several studies. Interesting that it all kind of comes with the facilitation, which means you do together with others. And it ends always in the norms. So I think that's what I figured out after these 2 days, 3 days, is the norms, why you're so focused on the norms, because that's all the other social influence principles are contributing to the perception of the norms, which is a dependent variable in this case. And there is another way how to look more deeper into dimensions of these, and of course you know very much better than I do. Injunctive, descriptive is here, and the same also applies for all of the other 7 principles. They have subdimensions. So coming now to the next big study that we did at MIT, we engaged companies, 14 companies, real companies with the real employees, and their commutes to work and back. We extracted data from their participation, and we looked at those who ride bikes. Based on the bike ridership, we arranged them in the rankings. And there are 4 different rankings. These are participant companies, and we not only enabled participants to look at the data, we asked them to put in every company in offices on the TV. So people who are not even aware of that bikes exist, now they're aware that they have colleagues riding bikes, and so forth. And this was really effective. In 6 weeks, people commuted to work and back 30,000 miles. So it was a good number. And there were more engagement into discussing that possibility. So that's summarized in the paper about social influencing systems again. And then another highlight, which is a recent study, which will be published this year, where we again looked back on the 7 principles, and we still have the facilitation as the start and norms as the end. And besides that, we developed the scale, and we also developed the research model, how we can look separately, not only in the norms as the one fundamental thing, but also how the other social influence principles have their role in predicting the behavioral outcomes. And the last two, this is about moderation. So we make sure that we design something that is not backfiring. So imagine this is a weather forecast, and we would like a person who would like to do more running be more motivated. We have different forecasts in different cities. And imagine you have one feature on top of this design, which says how many other people are now out for a run. That's showing the green people in the city. So let's say Stanford, you have 74 right now. In Eindhoven, you have 12. And then in Chicago, you have 0. And you don't want that. So the tool number 7 is that... But then again, we know these people that are especially willing to go out here, say, I will be the first one. Okay, there's nobody, I can do that. But then for the average person, that's demotivating. And then instead of that, you're stretching the data backwards, and you say, in the last month, on a similar weather, we had 3. So you're not lying, you're just stretching the data to accommodate your positive end. So that's to summarize tool number 7. The other people, they're unpredictable. You don't know whether they're going to be or not. If they are, it increases your motivation. If they are average, then it moderates. And if there is 0, it decreases. That's another paper about typology of computer-supported influence by me from the MIT time. And now we're coming down to the 8th tool, which is about ethics. So when we design influential technology, we have to be very mindful because it can be used for good and for bad. And therefore, this tool number 8 explains if you're intended a good behavior, it's positive for the users and it's intended, so that's your target. There can be side behaviors which are not targeted, but they are positive, so that's surprise. And there are these 2 quadrants which produce negative outcomes for the users. This is backfiring. You didn't plan for that, but there was a subgroup of people reacting unexpectedly. So that's backfire. And in this corner, it's intended by design, and it's negative, so it's a dark pattern. So let's just show you one example related to the norms, which was out of the backfiring quadrant. Just say no to dare. That was the campaign for drug abuse resistance education, and they was communicating. You know, these students do that drugs, but you say no. And then this school students do the drugs, but you say no. And and we call this backfire reverse norming. And that's quite popular, I think. Also, you know some examples. And that's summarized in a paper which is called Persuasive Backfiring, when behavior change interventions trigger negative unintended outcomes. And the last examples come from the MIT time when we were thinking about behaviors related with how we do groceries, and we would always have the data coming from the counters, and we would be just assigning whether the product is healthier, so it's green, and unhealthier is red. We have that data. We can install it already today. Why don't we do it? I don't know. And that would be not only informing the user himself or herself, but also we can aggregate per day, and we could highlight green grocery stores versus red grocery stores from the distance. And then a student in my class, it was about sedentary behavior. And as MIT requires the implementation, so there is a pressure sensor, there's this LED strip, and it changes the color as you sit from red to green. And it comes down to green, it's a signal to stand up. People say, why don't you just vibrate the chair? The person would know. That's the problem. We know what's better for us. The chair should change the color to engage social interaction. So somebody needs to come to me and say, Agnes, your chair is...
So when do you work?
This was the fast version of that. and
It's once an hour. So what did it do? It beeped, or what did it do?
that was a demonstration, just to say that this is how it should work, and this is how we implement that. So.
Eject you from the chair?
And the final and the final example, we also applied this to the business. And this is a kiosk, and these kiosks in the United States, more than 10,000 locations in groceries and pharmacies. It allows you to measure your blood pressure and weight and to calculate your body mass index. And the problem was because people can use it anonymously, but the business would like to have the accounts. And how can we convert the people? And we use the same approach. You have the data about your account holders. So why don't you, after the new user enters the gender and age, pull out of the data how many similar other people have succeeded to lower their blood pressure and improve their body mass index after that. So that was a very basic thing. So when the person entered, age and gender, this new message showed up. We made the A/B testing, so there was kiosks without that message. It was just saying register your account, and the other group had this message that's similar, like 1,241 women of your age actually improved their vitals because of having the account, and account enables the users to follow their progress and the previous measurements. So that was the increase, and for the total group it was plus 20% increase, and separately for the weight group it was even higher. And this is the example how we can achieve the transformation by design using the transforming framework, and all of this stuff is available on the website. Transforms Me, my TEDx talks, tools to download, and there's a research literature as well. So that's the gateway to the transformation. Thank you.
That was so fun. I can't resist saying I can't resist mentioning a tool that was used, and it was unintended, but it had a really big effect. It's one of my favorite examples from the World Development Report on Behavioral Econ. It's the electronic balloting machine that was used in Brazil, and it enabled you to interact with a kind of cell phone-like interface to indicate that you want to vote for Mr. 123 for dog catcher or congressman. Apparently, when you vote in Brazil, you vote for Brazilian candidates. So it's really hard, and the median education is only 4th grade. The second you say you want to vote for Mr. 123, you see the person's picture. So you get rewarded. And if you didn't, and if that wasn't who you intended, then you can put another person. You can say, okay, I want to vote for 4, 5, 6. And you can keep doing that all night till you get a match between who you actually want and what you've indicated in the cell phone. And this had such a big effect. Apparently voting is mandatory, but obviously voting correctly, voting with thought, you can't mandate that. And it created so much more thought, as particularly for the uneducated people, that it shifted power in every municipality pretty much to the pro-poor parties, who then spent more money on health care, which is free and used primarily by the poor in Brazil, and it lowered low birth rate babies. So it had a big impact, and you transform them just in the moment of voting. But that transformed society.
Great example. Happy for them.
Okay, so thanks. So I would just want to come back for your model with the 7 attributes that all boils down to norms.
Yes.
And yeah, so yeah, 33.
The old one or the new one?
I don't know, 33 I think. From here, that's
okay, the new one, right? Okay, let's do the new one.
Yeah, so judging from the flow of the arrows, it looks like there's a one direction there. So, and I was wondering, since we do believe that social norms influence in the backward direction, that is, they influence learning, they influence cooperation, they influence competition. So how do you address that?
So that's structural equation modeling. So those who are familiar with that, there cannot be loops in the modeling by definition. So therefore, first of all, and that was in investigative process. So we developed scale, which means we had 6 items per construct, and we ran this data collection, and then we looked at the strongest correlations, and we got confirmed the previous model in many of those. So those are the strongest. So you can imagine if there is a ranking, for example, which is a competition, within the ranking you can see social comparison. So therefore, that social comparison is very strongly connected to competition. And usually, and then there is some tools that also can highlight prediction for the direction of the arrow. And this we also use that to really point them that direction, which was suggested by the statistics. But I fully agree, there are multiple other ways. And in the physical world, it's all mixed all together. It's a social influence as a thing. And then scientists over the last 100 years have tried to decompose them and say, okay, but this looks like more of a cooperation social thing. And therefore they are a little apart. But it's still, those are the strongest correlations and directions how they once one principle is present is predicting the perception of the other principle. So if the facilitation, which means the presence of others right now doing the same thing as I do, that creates the environment that actually everything starts. And I think that's why it's a starting point. And then you compare yourself with the other participants, and then you might start to compete with some of them and getting better. And then because you, for example, running and you're the first, you feel like you're recognized because you're running the first. And so coming down to the norms.
Don't you think that social norms cause facilitation to begin with?
That's a good idea. It's just impossible for structural equation modeling to point the arrow back to the beginning. But that was, the whole work is about saying it's much richer than just social norms or cooperation or learning. These are other principles and they have their own specific character and a specific role. Why it's so important? Because in the physical world where we do most of the studies, it's observational or the survey. But my work is more technological. How can we design social learning? How can we design social comparison into the technology so that it would constantly work? And that's why we need to better understand each separately, so we would be better designers of them. We would be saying, okay, for this campaign, we would be preferring to use cooperation in design and recognition. And then we would immediately know, once we introduce that, it will also predict perception of the other features this way, most likely, as a science usually interpret that.
Just a quick time for, well, we have a couple more people who want to ask questions.
You gotta ask the boss.
Yeah. Do we have, okay. Okay.
Real quick, where's social identity, or the concept of where you feel a part of a group? And
right, there are social identity, social commitment, social other things, and then we can have like bunch of the things into this. This comes out of the work related with persuasive technology. Again, it comes down to the use of technology and design of technology. And these have been showing up as the most popular and most frequent. So there is a book, Persuasive Technology, and these 7 are in the book. So that's my quick answer.
I just was wondering if you can comment on sort of ethical issues. This will come up probably in one of the groups that's coming up, because these are all presumably pro-social motivations to change your health and well-being, but presumably the same technology and the same model that's powerful in that context could be used for sort of nefarious types of motives. I mean, so I'm just curious about your thought on that, since you're making a very powerful tool to change behavior.
Right. So then we go. So that's why we have tool 8. This whole collection emerged as a knowledge that was one day appearing to be coherently following each of the others. So if I look back to the work, this came out first. So it was the understanding of and then later it came out the second paper about, I think, the backfires, and then about the design. So this 8 tool explains, and this is what I teach in my Transforming Business Ethics course, that you design for this is a good end for the users, and you can have that. But then everyone, if they want, they can use on this end. And big companies already today are criticized for doing that quite often. And I think the only way we can cope with that is to speak more about this and show tools like this, that the people, the average user, would be more aware of what's happening. And sometimes even designers ask, how can we change that perception of the user so the user would know whether he's tricked or not? And I think it's also cultural change or the social norm change if designers of with ethical intentions would be making their products more transparent, because the transparency is the weapon for good means or the good ends, which means every time user would feel whether I understand what this app is doing to me and whether I understand how it works. And that would be the trigger. And if the user feels good about knowing how it works and seeing how it does that, the transparency is there. And the user having two options between one app and the second app would say, oh, I feel better about this because I understand how it works. And automatically disqualifying by not using it. And therefore, the bad guys would be having less and less attraction to their apps just by the design of the more proper design of the positive end. All right, thanks.